When I came to see Savitha in her performance of Yudh, her dance production, I had a general feeling of jadedness about artists doing classical dance, proclaiming that this was, something different. When the show started, I was thinking to myself, this is not just different, it's a revolution.
ಧರಿ ತಣ ತಣ ಜುಣು ಜುಣು ದಿಮಿ ದಿಮಿ ಕಿಟ ಜಂ ತಚ್ಚಂ ತತ್ತಚ್ಚಂ ತರ್ರಿ ಕಿಟ ಜಂ ಧರಿ ತಣತ್ತ ತಣ ಜುಣುತ್ತ ಜುಣು ದಿಮಿತ್ತ ದಿಮಿ ಕಿಟತ್ತ ಜಂ ತಚ್ಚಂ ತತ್ತಚ್ಚಂ ತರ್ರಿ ಕಿಟ ಜಂ
My productions, Soul Cages, Yudh, Prophet, and now Chains, did not come about as an accident. There is a long, tortuous journey behind it, and much of it started when I resided outside India, and I would come every season to perform in Chennai, be part of this wonderful dance festival that allowed dancers to find themselves and feel that connection with the audience. So what I performed here were traditional pieces, usually about 4 to 5 pieces extolling the virtues of a god or goddess, many of them centering around a heroine who was pining for her beloved. So I would perform what is traditionally referred to as a margam. And what appalled me when I would come and perform for an audience that I sought to establish that unique rapport with was the complete callousness with which the audience approached a dance performance. Most of my audiences who came to these performances seemed to be engaged with their own lives more than really connecting with me. They had their phones out, or they would come partway through the performance and leave in the middle. And a lot of the audiences for performers for the dance festival seemed to come from an audience base that was already set up for them. For instance, the audiences would be family, friends, or members of the dance school who were there out of some sort of obligatory relationship for attendance. And when I completed my performance, one of the dance enthusiasts, a student perhaps, would come up to me and say, "Akka, that was wonderful." However, the lack of the audience, it always made me want to change something. And I internalized it. Over time, I realized that the content couldn't possibly be subject to any questioning because the content was divine. It was given to me by my gurus, and it was handed down to be followed in all its perfection. So then I thought perhaps the fault lay in my dancing technique, that I had to somehow discover deeper aramandis, better nritta, more meaningful abhinaya. It was always about the dancer and less about the show itself. Now, while this was going on, simultaneously, my partner, Shrikant, started asking some very difficult questions of me. Questions that made me pause, questions that made me want to reconsider my opinion about what the content of Bharatanatyam performances needed to be.
I am not a dancer, nor am I a dance aficionado. In fact, I have no idea what these dances signify for the most part, which is why I come into this frame as somebody from the lay audience. Now, what I hear all the time is that this is a national cultural treasure. These dances are a national cultural treasure. But what I see in terms of the reverence towards it, which should come from its audience members, I find that missing most of the time. So here we have an interesting paradox. We have something that is really important, or acclaimed to be really important to Indian tradition and culture. And yet I don't see that reverence coming up anywhere when the audience is sitting around, except for those that are actually into the dance. The normal audience that comes to these shows don't seem to have any strong feelings one way or the other towards the dance form. My problem with the dance form was twofold. One, the art form was so codified that for me it became very difficult to figure out what was being said through those hand gestures, through those movements. There was nothing that was being explained to me. I mean, I didn't have a ready reckoner to tell me what these meant, and therefore I frequently only got a summary of what was being done, but I didn't get the nuances. But my second problem with this was a much bigger problem. On one hand, we have words that were being used, and I quote this from an actual song that they frequently play in these concerts. The wordings of this song go, "My husband is not in town, my father-in-law is deaf, my mother-in-law is fast asleep, so this is the right time for you to come inside, O Lord." Now, to me, this doesn't sound like divinity, it sounds obscene. And is this what our children are dancing to in the name of culture, is the first thing that comes to my mind.
It may have seemed obvious to Shri as a lay audience member that he was not connecting to my dance, but to me it came as a thunderbolt to tell me that an ancient art form needed to be questioned on its content was something that took me a while to process and understand. We as dancers feel that there is something sacred about religion and mythology and the stories we tell, but it doesn't seem to excite audiences.
Why would it? Let's assume for the next year, if all movies that were made had the same content, only the actors performing the content were going to be different. It would be what I would call a watershed year as far as cinema goes. And yet, when it comes to classical dance, we haven't changed the content in decades, centuries even. So why would there be an interest in the content of what is being presented? Everybody knows it all.
So if the content needed to be changed, what could it be about? There were others who were dancing on themes that were centered around social issues, the environment, and I somehow felt that if there was a box around traditional Bharatanatyam, then there should be no box. There shouldn't be a box of a social cause or a particular platform that might be relevant only to me. It had to become limitless in reaching out to an audience. But where would we get that kind of a content? And that is when I turned to Shri and asked him to go on, walk the talk, find me a theme, a narrative, something that would engage the audience and grip them and make them watch the show in a way that they weren't able to take their attention off, not even for a second.